Hey, Pastor Tarun here. Welcome to Authentic Church. It's so good to have you with us. We really pray that this sermon blesses you and helps you to experience the authentic love of Jesus Christ in your life today. Hey, before we get into the message, can you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button so that we can keep you up to date with the latest sermons every week? All right, here's the message.
Now, we've been doing a series called Seed, Time, and Harvest. If you've been with us for the last 2 weeks, you would know that we talked about planting a seed that would reap a harvest for generations to come. And one of the things we've been talking about is planting the seed of generosity and finance and investing in the work of God so that we can see generations to come to know Jesus. And there is a time of waiting, but there's also a time for harvest. And today I want to talk about harvest. I want to wrap it up. And Jesus actually said in John chapter 4, verse 35, he said this, "You know the saying, 4 months between planting and harvest, but I say to you, wake up." Say to somebody next to you, wake up, wake up. I'll tell you what, if you didn't wake up this morning with that cold weather, I don't know what. Wake up and look around. The fields are already ripe and ready for harvest. I want to talk to you today about harvesting for the future, harvesting for the next generation. And Jesus said, we can spend a lot of our life saying, "Oh, I'm waiting for the harvest. I'm hoping that Jesus will do something, will transform the community that I'm in, will bring people in, will show them that His love and His forgiveness." And we can wait for harvest, but Jesus says, do you know what? There's harvest happening all around you all the time. The problem is not whether the harvest is happening. The problem is whether we're participating or not. In that passage, it actually says, ask the Lord of the harvest, that's Jesus, to send more laborers into the field. It's not that there's no harvest, it's just there's not enough people out there harvesting. Are you catching my drift? You see, Jesus is doing a work in our communities, in our cities, in our country, in the nations, and if we go to sleep, if we are not awake, we're going to miss it. But the great thing is Jesus actually invites all of us to be a part of the harvest. He actually says, if you wake up now, if you recognize what's going on around you right now, you get to participate. You don't have to look back and say, "Oh, when did that happen? I missed it." But you actually get to be a part of what's going on now in the moment. I don't know what you were doing on September 12th, 2001. Now, for some of you, you weren't even born, okay? So I'm going to tell you a little story about a time before you were born. For the rest of you, you will know this day, but you won't recognize the date that I quoted, September 12th. Some of you are saying, no, September 11th was a significant day, not September 12th. Well, actually, in Australia, it was September 12th, because we're a day ahead of America. And if you know, that was the day that the Twin Towers they came down in the US. And I remember where I was on September 12th. It was about midnight. I was living in a share house in Sydney. And there was a couple of people sharing this house, and I didn't actually know them. I'd only just moved in, and I'd come in late one night, and I'm sitting in the lounge room, and I turned on the telly, and I'm sitting there watching the telly, and one of my housemates decided he wanted to have a chat, and so we're just chatting about, I don't know, whatever, some inane stuff that I can't even remember. And as he was talking to me, I glanced at the telly, and I saw a picture of the Twin Towers on fire. And then suddenly, like down the bottom, it said, "Breaking news, Twin Towers attack." And then it flashed to another picture where it showed a plane flying into the Pentagon. And I said to my housemate, I said, "Oh my gosh, did you see that? Did you see that?" And he sort of glances over, and it didn't register for him. He was just like, "Oh yeah, that's interesting." And he kept on talking about whatever vacuous thing he was talking about. But I was transfixed on the television. I couldn't take my eyes off. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. And as I sat there watching, and many of you know the story of over the hours that unfolded, those Twin Towers actually ended up collapsing. And it caused a huge amount of panic and a huge amount of fear throughout the Western world as the events unfolded days later. I remember having conversations with people at work and friends of mine, and they were saying, what's going to happen? Is it going to be a World War III? Or, what's happening? Is it going to happen in Australia? And people were fearful. People didn't know what to do with themselves. People felt lost. People felt helpless to make any difference to such a tragic event. Some time ago, I read a story about a man who was working very close to the Twin Towers. His name was Lyndon Harris. He was actually a reverend for the Episcopalian Church, and he had just been posted at St. Paul's Church, one city block from the Twin Towers. And as the events unfolded at the Twin Towers and they came down and the devastation wreaked havoc on the city of New York, Lyndon Harris decided that he couldn't just sit by and do nothing. Day after day, he would watch streams of rescue workers and first responders trying to drag people out of the rubble, and the dust covered the city like a blanket, and the devastation was so widespread. And as he stood in his church that was miraculously unaffected by the towers coming down, he decided he was going to do something with what he had. And he opened the doors to his church, and he made contact with the first responders, and he said, if your people need a place to rest, St. Paul's Church down the road, we've got beds, we've got hot cup of tea and coffee, we've got food. We're going to be open 24 hours a day for any first responders. And over the coming weeks, thousands and thousands of first responders would flock to St. Paul's for some refuge, for some rest, for some much needed sleep and some sustenance. Well, word got around and people started talking about what St. Paul's was doing and what Lyndon Harris was doing. And all over the city of New York, chefs in restaurants started cooking meals and sending those meals down to St. Paul's to make sure they had enough food for all the first responders. Pet stores and animal lovers started sending dog food down to St. Paul's because there was lots of rescue dogs that were working and they needed to be fed as well. Volunteers from all over the city, from every walk of life, from every religion, flocked to St. Paul's to do their part, to help make a difference in such devastation and such helplessness. That over the coming weeks, they ended up serving over 1 million meals to first responders. Thousands and thousands of first responders and their families were looked after by St. Paul's and the act of generosity of Lyndon Harris. Sadly, Lyndon Harris's story didn't end terribly well. His bishop wasn't thrilled about the way that he had used the church, and he ended up losing his job as a reverend in the church. But he didn't stop there. He decided, you know what, I'm not going to let this stop me doing good. And after many years of working through his pain, he actually he'd learnt to forgive those who had hurt him. He learned to forgive those people who had let him down. And now he travels all over the world teaching in schools a framework for forgiveness. Because he said if you don't learn how to forgive, you can't live life. And he sets up all over the world, he sets up these things called gardens of forgiveness where he teaches young people how to forgive people who have hurt them. There's one guy who was in the middle of absolute devastation, absolute helplessness, decided that I can't just stand by and watch this happen. I need to do something about it. There was a guy in the Bible who had a similar experience. His name was Nehemiah. And Nehemiah was part of a group of Jews who had been living in exile in Babylon. You see, the nation of Israel and Judah had been overtaken by the Assyrians and the Babylonians 70 years earlier, and many of their young people had been taken off into captivity. And Nehemiah had actually been born and raised in Persia, in exile. He had never been home to his home place of Judah. But he heard after 70 years that some people were starting to return. But when they returned, they found the city of Jerusalem absolutely destroyed. The walls had been knocked down. These great, gigantic walls made out of limestone had been knocked down. These beautiful wooden gates had been burned to a cinder. And the city had been left absolutely ruined. Every house and every building had been leveled. And people were coming back to Jerusalem to resettle after 70 years and finding nothing but devastation and ruins. The enemies of the Jewish people had moved in, and they had moved in around, and they were causing trouble for these people. And Nehemiah hears about this. He's in the service of Artaxerxes, the king of Persia. And he goes to his king and he says, my hometown, my city, Jerusalem, is in ruins, and I need to go back and rebuild it. And miraculously, Artaxerxes says to him, you know what? You can go and rebuild your city. Not only will I send you with my blessing, I'm actually going to pay for it as well. And Artaxerxes, a foreign king, actually funded the rebuilding of Jerusalem after the exile. And he gave Nehemiah permission to go to visit all the neighboring countries that Persia had control of and request the materials and request all of the resources they needed to rebuild the walls, timber and stone and workers. And Nehemiah returns to Jerusalem. And I want to pick up his story in chapter 2 of Nehemiah. If you haven't got a Bible, that's okay. We're going to bring it up on the screen right now. And Nehemiah comes and he takes a look around Jerusalem and to see the devastation and destruction. And he says this, he said, you know very well what trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire. But let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and end this disgrace. You see, what you've got to understand is that when you live in a time when there is destruction, or you live in a time when you see that there is destruction or helplessness around you, it takes somebody to make a decision to do something different. It takes somebody to say, you know what, I'm not going to stand by and just watch the devastation unfold in front of me. I'm actually going to stand up and I'm actually going to do something about it. You know, we live in a time in Australia where a lot of people don't feel confident about the future. A lot of people are fearful. The cost of living is rising. Political tensions all over the world are really quite unpredictable. And coming out of COVID, so many people are still suffering from isolation and depression. And we actually live in a city in Logan where so many of the most pointy challenges in society are most evident. Do you know Logan has a reputation all over Australia, not for many of the right reasons. We boast some records that we probably shouldn't boast. Sadly, Logan, alongside the Gold Coast, has the highest rate of domestic violence in the whole of Australia. We have the highest rates of drug use in Australia. We have the highest rates of unemployment and poverty in Australia. And we live in a city that if you hadn't noticed, if you just go out your front door, there's a lot of devastation. There's a lot of broken people. There's a lot of families that are doing it tough. You just have to spend 5 minutes in any of the local schools and talk to any of the children that go to local schools and find out their story to see the kind of devastation that many families are living through in the city of Logan. And when we first moved to the city of Logan nearly 10 years ago now, probably more, I think it was like maybe 12 years ago now, one of the things that really was impressed upon mine and Melanie's heart was this, that Logan is not going to stay a broken city. Logan has a hope. Logan has a future. And I truly believe this, and I say this with no apology, I truly believe that the hope and the future of Logan is Jesus. That for all the government assistance that has been thrown at Logan, for all the programs and all the social welfare that we have in Logan, and all of it is good and all of it is necessary, there is nothing that can mend the brokenness of a human being better than the love and forgiveness of Jesus Christ. And we as a church, at Authentic Church, we've been called to reach this city with the love and the new life of Jesus Christ. Jesus says, I come to give you life in abundance. I came to set the captives free. I came to give sight to the blind. I came to declare the year of God's favor. And I really believe that as a church, we are called to declare the year of God's favor on the city of Logan. That the captives can be set free. That broken hearts can be repaired and mended. That blind eyes can be opened. That we will see this city not known as the city of desperation and brokenness, but a city of life and vibrance and hope. And a couple of years ago, Pastor Melanie and I joined this church And we got stuck in, and there was already an amazing pantry and op shop work here, and we decided, you know what, we're just going to do everything we can to just meet the needs of the people that God brings us. And incredibly, in 2020 and 2021, as in the middle of COVID, when everything was shutting down, Authentic Church opened up because there was so much need. And there was so much need in the community for food and for relief that we couldn't keep our doors closed. And we saw, when Melanie and I came, we had a pantry. There was a pantry in the parents' room out the back. Now, if you haven't seen the parents' room is smaller than this stage. The parents' room is like probably about half this stage size. And there was a small pantry in the parents' room, and people would flock to that pantry every day of the week looking for assistance, looking for low-cost groceries. And during the pandemic, we were able to move that pantry into the foyer and expand it, double its space. But people just kept coming. And so we were able to fantastically open up a demountable building at the back that was double the space again. And that demountable building has served us well for a couple of years, but people just keep coming. They just keep coming. Do you know, in the first 6 months of this year, we've seen over 5,000 people come through the pantry and op shop. 5,000 people. Look, I want to applaud the volunteers and the staff that run the pantry and the op shop because they do an incredible job. But there's something about that number that breaks my heart. There's something about that number that says something is not right in this city when you have so many people flocking to get low-cost groceries and low-cost food and low-cost homewares because they're just struggling so much they can't survive. And I am so thrilled that we as a church can do something about it. But then there's something inside of me that says, God, we need to do more. There is so much need, and the need just keeps growing and growing and growing. And Nehemiah understood this. He saw the broken walls of his city and he says, somebody needs to do something. And the reality is, not everybody will see things the way that you see them. Nehemiah had some opposers. Nehemiah had people that criticized him. Nehemiah had people that came out and said, you know what? You're not going to be able to do this. This is an impossible task. This is ridiculous. Why don't you just pack your bags and go home? Who do you think you are? And this is what Nehemiah said when he was faced with the opposition of people who didn't believe that he could do what he wanted to do. He said this in Nehemiah 2:20. He said, the God of heaven will help us succeed. We, his servants, will start rebuilding this wall, but you have no share, no legal right or historical claim on Jerusalem. He's saying this to the enemies of Jerusalem. He says the God of heaven will give us success. And I want to say today that if you call Authentic Church home, the God of heaven is going to help us meet the needs of the people that need to be met. The God of heaven is going to help us do things that we never thought would be possible in this community. But you've got to understand something as well. There's an enemy that wants to destroy lives. There is an enemy that wants to destroy families. But here's the good news. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, the enemy has no claim over Logan. The enemy may look like he's winning right now, but the enemy has no claim over Logan. When Jesus died and he was raised from the dead, he signaled to all the powers in heaven and on earth, this is what Ephesians says, that he was in control. There is no power, whether they are human powers or whether they are spiritual powers, there is no power in heaven or earth that has control over the city of Logan unless we let it. And we as the church have the opportunity to stand up and say, do you know what? Enough's enough. We're going to do something about this because you don't have the power over the city of Logan. Jesus has the power over the city of Logan, and he's called us to rebuild the walls. He's called us to help the brokenhearted. He's called us to set the captives free. And so I want to challenge you today as you sit here today, whether you are a visitor or whether you call Authentic Church home, what will you do for the generations that will come? Will we wait for another generation to roll by where they will just not experience any change, where their situation will be the same as their parents' situation and their children's situation will be the same as their grandparents' situation? Or are we going to take a stand and say, you know what, enough is enough. Something needs to be done. The power of Jesus, the love of Jesus needs to be shared with this community in greater and greater ways. Nehemiah, despite all the odds, he gathered a group of people and he inspired them to stand up and do something with what they had. They didn't have much, but he said, you know what? We can do what we can. We can take the broken stones and we can restack them and we can rebuild this city. And chapter 6 of Nehemiah, it says this: on October the 2nd, the wall was finished, just 52 days after they had begun. 52 days, that's a little over a month and a half. 52 days to rebuild city walls. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of the city of Jerusalem. I had the privilege of being there. Their walls are big, okay? That's no mean feat to rebuild walls. And they didn't have any electronic or any technology to lift those stones. It's all manual labor. And in 52 days, a group of people said, you know what? Enough's enough. We can do something better. We can make a difference in this city. And I want to say today that we can make a difference in this city. We might be small in number, but we're big in vision. We're big in heart. And you know what? God doesn't need you to have all the answers. God just needs you to say, you know what? I want to be a part of what's going on here. Do you know there's 6 people that got baptized today? Do you know what excites me the most about those 6 people? Is just about every single one of them, this year was their first year in church. This year, it's not like they grew up in Christian families or they've been going to church their whole life. They came into church and they met Jesus, and Jesus transformed their lives in such a significant way that they said, you know what? I want to do this full time. I don't want to be a part-time Christian anymore. I've decided I'm going to follow Jesus with all of my heart. That's what we do church for. We don't do church to sit around and sing Kumbaya. We do church so that we can reach the lost out there that need to know Jesus, and we can see them come to know Jesus, get baptized, and then go on strong and then start changing other people's lives. That's what we do church for. That's what we're about. Do you know last year, we had a word from Isaiah 54 when I was praying about how we could approach the year, and we believe that God gave us a word that said, make more room. I'm going to send you more people. There's a passage in Isaiah that says, make more room, extend the boundaries of your tent. It's because there's new babies going to come, all right? And so we decided we're going to make more room. And we started planning for an expansion of our pantry and our church and our op shop facility because Lord knows we need more room, especially in our pantry. And so we came to 2022 with great excitement. We thought, this is the year. We're going to go hard this year. We're going to make more room. We're going to break ground on a new building. And the start of the year comes, and we're all geared up, and our team was ready, and then they announced a COVID lockdown. 3 weeks, no church, no pantry, no op shop, shut down. We said, that's okay. We'll get back on the bike. We're going to make more room. And just as we were starting to open up, it started to rain. And it kept on raining. And it rained for days. 40 days and 40 nights, it felt like. And at the end of that rain, our op shop had been flooded. And we had to once again close down what we were doing because we were facing a natural opposition of not being able to. We were wading through water knee deep in our op shop. But we got back on the bike and we said, okay, we can clean this up and we're going to make do with what we've got while we try and process the insurance and all the rest of it. And the pantry team, they got back on their bike and they got going. And we relaunched our cafe this year to create a space for people to come and get together. And do you know what? Despite all of the opposition, despite all of the setbacks we've had at the beginning of this year, we have seen 5,000 people pass through our doors, our op shop and our pantry in the first 6 months. We've been able to give away 173 free food hampers to families that are in need. This is exciting. This is you guys. You guys do this. We've been able to donate over $1,500 worth of textbooks and stationery to kids in schools that can't afford to buy stationery and textbooks. We've been able to supply $3,000 worth of uniforms to students in schools that their families couldn't afford to buy them uniforms. There have been so many opportunities where people just keep lobbing up and saying, hey, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? We've been able to partner with Maraganya, which is an Indigenous organisation that helps in domestic violence, helping to give food and clothes for families that are in desperate need and in emergency situations. There have been so many opportunities that God just keeps bringing into our lap. And do you know what that tells me? That tells me we're on the right path. It tells me we're on the right path, because if God keeps opening the doors for you, one of the things you can say is, well, okay, if the door's open, then I've got to step through it. Okay, I've got to step through it. And that's what our team has really been trying to do this year, is just step into whatever opportunity God has been giving us. And I know some of you have been asking the question, okay, so what happened to the building? Last year you told us there was going to be a building. And I'm glad you asked. We haven't forgotten about the building. We've been working really hard behind the scenes, and there's been a few things we've had to work through. We've got a complex block here where much of, as far as the council is concerned, pretty much the entire block is a floodplain, all right? And so it requires very specific design to mitigate flood limitations. And so one of the biggest challenges we've had is, how do we design a building that will accommodate the people that we need to accommodate and still have enough car parks and also accommodate all the flood mitigation that we have to accommodate. And so it's been a challenge, but Nick and Lena, our architect, have been working really hard to get that. Yeah, you can say thank you to Nick, because it's been amazing. And I am very, very excited to share with you that this week we will be going to the town planners and we will be taking our plans to them. Oh, I thought you'd be more excited than that, my Lord. And in 3 weeks' time, I'll be meeting with a financial institution that has, at least in theory, agreed that they will help to back us in this project. And it's going to be amazing. But I want to encourage you, the work's not done yet. There's still a lot to do. And last year, through your generosity, we were able to raise over $70,000 towards this building project. So I want to say thank you all. Incredible. We've also, as a church, through managing our money well, we've been able to put away about $100,000 towards the deposit for building this project, which is going to be required. And just this week, and this is a real miracle, the insurance company that is looking after our flood claim has said, we're going to actually give you a cash payout. And the cash payout is $120,000, which is incredible, because we're going to build a new op shop. And so we can put that money to a bigger, better op shop facility. Rather than just repairing the one that we've got, we can actually put that towards a bigger and better op shop facility. So God has been really good, and you guys have been really generous. So I want to just commend you on how generous you have been throughout this year. And what I want to do now is I want to show you, we've got some drawings of what the new facility is going to look like, what we've decided on that is going to work with all our limitations. So Marky, do you want to bring that up? So up on the top, my left, your left. That's going to be the front of the building. Okay. What you're looking at is a new extended foyer. So the foyer will go out further front, and it will actually create room for more classrooms. So those windows down the side, they are Sunday school classrooms and parents' rooms where we can expand our ability to look after kids. At the moment, we have one kids' room, which is great for 20 kids, but when you've got more than 20 kids, it gets a little bit crowded. Okay, and so we've got some 4 classrooms. We've got new toilet facilities that will accommodate a much larger auditorium. And then over here, what you can see is that's the back of where the church is. That is the new community care building. That will be the op shop and the pantry, which will come off the back of the auditorium. And that will allow us to service probably 4 times as many people as we currently service, which is going to be amazing. Lena has geniusly found ways to put car parks in places that we didn't even know were possible. And we're going to have enough car parking to accommodate an auditorium that will seat 300 people. And so this auditorium will actually double. It will become a stadium seating in this section, and then there will be another section that will be floor seating. And all of this means is this. It means we can reach more people. Okay? It means we can reach more people. It means we can see more people baptized. It means we can see more people come to know the love of Jesus Christ. It means we can feed more people, help more families, help clothe more children. We're going to be able to help more schools. And all of that is possible because you guys are generous. But the job's not done yet. And so I want to ask you today, if you call Authentic Church home, I want to ask you today to consider partnering with us for the start of the building project. Once we have the town planning approval, we'll be able to actually start doing groundworks, which means all the drainage and the driveways and things like that we need to do before the building goes in. And I want to ask you as a church, if you call this facility home and you want to see us do more in the community, I want to ask you to say, you know what? I'm going to give something towards rebuilding the walls of this city. I'm going to do something to make this city livable. I'm going to do something to reach more people in my community. And so in just a moment, our ushers are going to have some envelopes that we're calling our building fund the Arise and Build building fund, because what Nehemiah said when he went back to the city, he said to all his friends, he said, come on, let's get up, let's arise, and let's build this city. And so we want to encourage you, let's get up together and do something for this city and build. And so what I want, as the ushers come around, just pass the Arise and Build envelopes out. And there are pens available, so if you need a pen, just put your hand up and we'll pass out pens. Now, if there are not enough Arise and Build envelopes, there are also our normal offering envelopes on the seat where you can actually indicate that you want to give to the Arise and Build fund. And so, Kai, if you can just come up and play some music. What we're going to do now is we're going to just take a couple of minutes to give you time to fill out. Now, there's a couple of options. Can I have one of those envelopes, please? Okay, if you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, I didn't come prepared for this, I'm not sure. That's okay. That's okay. We understand. What I want to indicate is up the top it says pledge. You don't have to have the money now. We're not asking you to pull it out of your pocket now. What we're asking you to do is say, you know what? Over the next 12 months, I'm going to pledge, I'm going to commit to contributing to this extension so that we can make a difference in this city. And so you can write down your pledge there and you can put down all of your details there. If you need tax-deductible receipts, we can actually provide that for you. And this is your opportunity to partner with us and make a difference in the city of Logan. While you're filling that out, I want to tell you a story. Sitting up the back there is my friend Errol. Can you give us a wave, Errol? Now, some of you know Errol. Most of you probably don't know this story, though. In about 1981, was it 81, 1980? 80. 1980, Errol had a life group down on the Gold Coast. He was part of a church called Gold Coast Christian Church, and he had a life group, and there was 25 people in that life group. And they were sitting around talking about the need for a school that would allow kids to learn about Jesus. And they said, Gold Coast has no Christian schools. There's no schools that can teach children about Jesus. And in their life group, they decided that they were going to do something about it. That's an ambitious plan, isn't it? Hey, there's no school. Let's do something about it. And so as a life group, 25, they made a decision that they were going to build a Christian school in conjunction with Gold Coast Christian Church. And Errol headed up that plan. And that first 25 people, they seeded money towards building a school that would reach young people for Jesus. And there was a family that was in that church, and that family had two little boys. There was a 4-year-old boy and there was a 2-year-old boy, and they went to that church as well. And as soon as that family heard there was going to be a Christian school, they enrolled their eldest boy in that Christian school. And the school said, he's too young. And my mum and dad said, put him in anyway. That little boy was me. I was one of the first students in Errol's school. How many students did we have that first year? It was like 20, 30. How many? 22 students. Errol's got photos of me this high in a little school uniform. I was so young that I used to fall asleep in class, and my teacher had a mattress, and she would put the mattress down in the back of the class and let me sleep the afternoon away. But my mum and dad were so keen to put me in an environment where I could learn about God. They said, look, just let him come to school. And I did grade 1 twice because I slept my way through the first time. In my second year, I learned how to misbehave, and I took a few trips to the Principal Errol's office. He had a big smacking paddle on his wall. It hurt. That school today is King's College down on the Gold Coast. I don't know if you know King's. King's is the largest Christian school in Australia. It is having a significant impact on not only the Gold Coast, but further beyond. King's now has, I think, 4 different campuses. They just did one in Logan Village. They've got Pimpamar, they've got Reedy Creek, and St. George, yeah. And they've got plans for like 10 campuses. They're making a difference not only in the city of the Gold Coast, but well beyond the city of the Gold Coast. But do you know that started with a group of 25 people and somebody that said, you know what? We need to do something about this. We need to do something about this. And we're not going to sit by and we're not going to wait for somebody else to fix it. We're going to fix it. I want to encourage you. I tell you that story because I don't want you to ever think, what can we do? We're just a little church. Do you know what? Little groups of people can make enormous differences to people's lives. My brother and I are both pastors of churches. And through what God has done in our life, we're able to reach many, many, many people that Errol was never able to reach. But because he invested in us, because he and the first 25 people said, hey, we're going to do something about this. We want to impart Jesus into these young people. My brother and I and many, many, many other young people have then gone on to follow Jesus and do amazing things for Jesus. Because why? Because somebody said, you know what? Let's do something about it. Let's do something about it.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We really pray that that message blessed you. If you enjoyed it, why don't you share it with a friend that you think will enjoy it also? And hit a like and give us a comment because we'd love to hear back from you. If you'd like to give to the work of Authentic Church or get more involved, head over to our website, authenticchurch.com.au. We look forward to seeing you next time.